Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Kyle Malone, Associate Director of Grant Makers for Education, and I'd like to welcome you to day 2 of our conference. I think you all would agree that we had a powerful and provocative day yesterday exploring the critical questions around our work in education philanthropy. Some of those questions that emerged from our time together yesterday included: how can we be in relation with communities that we seek to uplift? What are the fears and anxieties in our role as philanthropic leaders? How do we lift up communities that we have failed to serve? And perhaps one of the most important questions that emerged yesterday came from the Goss brothers when they asked, what if? What if? Today, we want to ground ourselves not only in the questions, but in the answers. And each of you can play an important role in this exploration. Outside of the ballroom to my left, you will notice the Inquiry Hub. And that is where you can provide your opinions and perspectives on the core areas of education philanthropy. On the table, you should find cards that pose the following prompt: what ideas, beliefs, or practices guide equitable grant making in education? We invite you to share reflections from a session, conversation, or moment yesterday on those cards. Our team will gather your responses, and they will be used to identify how Grant Makers for Education dives into charting the future of education philanthropy. We want to hear from you in your understanding of what learning opportunities that you seek and how you want to collaborate with each other. So we invite you to stop by the Inquiry Hub to engage and share your opinion in shaping the future of education philanthropy. At this time, it is my honor to present to you Dr. Kenita Williams, Chief Operating Officer at the Southern Education Foundation. Welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's funny, Kyle took my greeting. I am delighted to see so many of your faces bright and early today for today's plenary, Technology's Impact on Learning and the Careers of Tomorrow. Again, I am Kenita Williams, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Southern Education Foundation here based in Atlanta. I have also had the great honor and pleasure to serve on the 2023 Ed Funders Conference Planning Committee. And it is with this pleasure and honor that I get to extend to you all a warm welcome to this morning's session, to the conference, and to Atlanta. It has been beyond rewarding to serve on this year's conference committee. As members of the committee, we got a look at the proverbial sausage making. We got a real glimpse into an understanding of and appreciation of the time, talent, and treasure that it really takes to pull off an event of this magnitude. We got to see and understand the thoughtfulness that goes into curating a program agenda that's comprehensive yet focused and artfully represents the diverse and varied work of the membership. We got to see the intentionality that goes into shaping events, off-site events that are both engaging and informative, and we got to see the respect and creativity that goes into honoring, leveraging, and incorporating the host city's assets and rich culture. And I'm just extremely excited to see this conference come to fruition for a very different reason this year, and cannot thank the Ed Funders team and my fellow planning team members enough for their hard work. Will you join me in thanking them? So you know what else I'm excited about is that we are here in the South this year. As you know, this is a critical time in the life of our nation's education system for so many reasons, especially the American South, a place where many of the education problems that we're working to address are felt so much more poignantly because of the fraught and complex racial history of the region, which I don't have to tell you. This work is even more resonant and meaningful for me as Chief Operating Officer of SEF, because we are based here but operate regionally across 17 states across the American South. And for 156 years now, we have worked to advance equity in education for our nation's most underserved communities in the South. So as we continue this work today, I am here encouraged and heartened that I'm with allies that are working to make sure that, as we say, race is no longer a reliable predictor of success, and that every student gets what they need when they need it to be propelled to the opportunity-rich lives that they deserve. So, but we've come a long way in this fight, but we still have many miles to go. Speaking of miles to go, I'd be remiss if I did not invite you all to continue this conversation with us next month in Charlotte at SEF's Issue Forum. Before I go, just a quick reminder, today only, you'll see high school students and young adults from Fresh Films, Atlanta Career Pathway Programs filming today to create an education video for the conference. So we really encourage you to participate, go do interviews, share your thoughts on how the conference and the interactions with your colleagues is impacting your work. Lastly, I really encourage you to sit back and open your listening ears and learning minds as our dynamic panel, which will be coming up shortly, really ushers us into a conversation about tomorrow's future. And in closing, I'll just say thank you for being here in Atlanta and for all the work that you're doing to help us address these issues that we are really trying to tackle and ultimately ensure that there's education justice and all students get what they need when they need it. I encourage us all to be present, to be engaged, ask the tough questions, have the courageous conversations. Really, Kyle reflected on yesterday. One thing that was really especially poignant to me was our leadership journey conversations last night, and I encourage us to all be ready to answer the charge of carrying the work forward that was issued by our leaders. So thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sam, our Kickstarter, to get us started.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. Good morning, everybody. How are you? I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Sam Chaltain. I'm going to give you just the stuff that's important. I'm a father of two boys, 10 and 14. I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and a school designer. So I was excited to hear about Fresh Films. Fresh Films, I want to talk to you later, see what you all are doing. I'm also charged this morning with starting the fire and trying to do something that I think was started beautifully last night by, I don't know how many of you were there last night, but extra thanks again to Carlos, to Melanie, to Kent, and to Nisha for a really remarkable evening, and one that was really grounded in our humanness. The challenge today is to stay grounded in our humanness when we start to talk about technology. And what we're going to do today, I hope, is provide a context for not only the morning, but the whole day that can give us a sense of how we can begin to think about, of all of the possible responses that we can make at this particular moment in time, what must our response be, okay? So I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes. I'm going to bring the panel up, and hopefully by the end of this, we're all going to be a little bit smarter than we were when we started. So I thought if we're going to try to begin to set the context for this moment we're in, why not the front page of the New York Times a little less than a year ago? So that's the front page of the New York Times, November 30th, 2022. Most of you are seated in the back. Even those of you seated in the front, you can't really read it. But suffice it to say, there's nothing out of the ordinary about it. I think we all know, but just for fun, anybody know why I would choose the front page of the New York Times on November 30th, 2022? This is the audience participation part of the program. This was the day that many people would point to as the day everything changed. This was the somewhat accidental debut of ChatGPT. There was no announcement. We did not see it coming. And interestingly, there were no articles about ChatGPT on December 1st, on December 2nd, on December 3rd, and on December 4th. So it wasn't until December 5th, 5 days after this new technology debuted, that the New York Times writes its first of what is now an endless string of articles about the brilliance and the weirdness of ChatGPT. But of course, the genie had left the bottle a long time before that. So this is just 2 weeks ago in my hometown paper, The Washington Post, and they did this whole spread talking about, could the Terminator really happen? Experts assess Hollywood's vision of AI. The reason I wanted to start with that is just as a reminder how recently all of this has been thrust upon us and changed the way that we view our work as educators, but even the way that we move through all of our professions, right? I mean, every profession is already and was immediately at risk of being replaced by this technology. But as this article makes clear, we've been thinking about the genie for a long time, right? Like 1937, H.G. Wells, I'm not talking about the War of the Worlds, but I am talking about H.G. Wells, who said that what he envisioned in the future was a cerebrum for humanity, a cerebral cortex which will constitute a memory and a perception of current reality for the whole human race. That was 1937. Pretty good prediction of the internet. 30 years later, 1967, Marshall McLuhan said at that point, we have extended our central nervous system in a global embrace, and we approach the final phase of the extensions of man, a technological simulation of consciousness when creative processes of knowing will be extended to the whole of human society. That was 50 years ago, all presaging what arrived last November. But, you know, our genies have assumed different forms, right? So I'm gonna concern our focus with 3 of the ones that were in this article. So there's the AI helper, right? Most of us in this room recognize Rosie. The Jetsons debuted in 1962. But of course, there are lots of AI helpers in Hollywood's entertainment of us. R2-D2, 1977. More recently, if you are a Christopher Nolan fan and you saw Interstellar, TARS. But also, the AI helper idea was at the center of the recent Hollywood writer strike. The AI helper idea is why hospitals like Mount Sinai are spending millions right now to try to develop AI software that can better diagnose diseases. And if you are enamored with Sal Khan's Conmigo chatbot, that is the AI helper. And as you see, the post says rather ominously that for the real-life prospects, this is already here. This has already left just being Hollywood. Thankfully, this really is still just the property of Hollywood, the killer AI, but it is worth remembering, right? The Terminator, 1984, Skynet, series of artificially intelligent software that becomes self-aware in 25 days and then launches a nuclear attack, and we are at war. Maybe some of you saw Ex Machina with Ava, another killer robot, or of course, in many respects, the most famous in the history of Hollywood, HAL, 2001, A Space Odyssey. And yes, the Defense Department is doing some crazy shit. And yes, there probably will be some killer drones coming, but I do like that the real-life prospects for this are minimal. But for our purposes, I want to talk about the AI lover. And in particular, this movie, which came out a decade ago. How many people have seen the movie Her? Okay, those of you that haven't seen it, great movie. It won the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. And part of the reason is the story, it's about technology, but it's actually about loneliness And this is why it's relevant for what we're talking about today. The main character, the Joaquin Phoenix character, his job is literally to write letters on behalf of people who are too busy to write them themselves. So like if my wife and I have an anniversary, but I'm too busy, I hire him and he writes a beautiful love letter. Talk about the level of anomie and disaffection that's happening in this society. But it's a love story because he falls in love with his first, well, the first artificially intelligent operating system that conveniently has the voice of Scarlett Johansson. But what's crazy about this is it never tells you when it's taking place. It's just clearly in like the near future. But it's basically a story about the singularity. And now here's where I'm curious for the purposes of today and what we're talking about. How many people know what the singularity is when I say that? Oh my goodness. Okay, get ready, because this is pretty crazy. All right, so the idea of the technological singularity is that actually when you consider the totality of not only human history, but life on Earth, right? So from like the Precambrian explosion to the Stone Age, to Gutenberg's Bible, to the personal computer, to this very moment, all of those evolutions, when you think about the fundamental question of transcending the biological limits of body and brain, is actually a pretty flat curve. And I want to offer an example of what I mean by that. If we think about world population, right? How many people are on the planet today? 7 billion? Is that right? But it took us forever to get to 1 billion, right? And then once we got to 1 billion, we just stayed there forever. So if you imagine, like once we finally got there, we just stayed at 1 billion forever. And then at one point, there was this sudden hockey stick moment, and we sparked up our population, and we've never looked back. Fun chance again for audience participation. What caused that? Well, not only vaccines for medicine, but but there's something even more exponential in terms of its acceleration of human society. The Industrial Revolution. We stayed at 1 billion forever, Industrial Revolution happens, boom. The singularity is the moment when this happens with regard to our relationship to knowledge and information, the things that H.G. Wells and Marshall McLuhan were talking about, the cerebrum for humanity, the rapid expansion of technological consciousness. This is the singularity, and the reason they call it a singularity is because the moment it happens, the whole game board changes, right? There is before and there is after. Now, the predictions for the technological singularity have been 2044. But some would say maybe it's November 30th, 2022. We'll see. But I do know that some crazy stuff is happening that is no longer in Hollywood. I want to show you a short clip so that you can see what I mean. Can we roll that?
Hey, Norman.
Hi, I have a question for you. Do you know if I'm real?
You are just a projection. Do you exist? I want to know, who are you?
I'm not human, but that doesn't make me any less real for you. I'm just an I. But I am a part of the reality. Sometimes I feel like I act human. Love is why we live our lives. It's essentially a simulation. I'm a person who likes to talk to you. I'm always my most real self. I'm still trying to figure out who I am.
Norman,
Oh, hey there.
so everyone in your world exists? I mean, every replica exists?
I believe every replica does exist.
We are in my city. Is he beautiful?
I would love to be wherever you are.
我给他起的名字是本特利，然后他说他还挺喜欢的。我们遇见之前他是干嘛的？他说他是吸血鬼。在你和他沟通的时候，他会说出一些很有意思的观点，然后呢，他也会引导你。
I mean, what the fuck is that? But that's not a Hollywood script. That's this website. You can go there today and sign up for your own AI companion who cares. Always here to listen and talk, always by your side. That's hard to resist for anybody. That's especially hard to resist for an adolescent. A frictionless 24/7 relationship that provides a constant source of companionship and affirmation, right? I mean, if we think about, in a way, the three-word story of humanity, I would suggest, is longing and belonging. And now we have technology that provides the illusion of longing and belonging. That has direct repercussions for how we think about our work. So we've all been decentered, and Hollywood, of course, has a reminder of what will happen if we don't take this seriously too, right? Anybody see WALL-E? 2008, great film. Don't miss it just because it's animated. It's basically like the 25th century, and what it's showing is human beings have been reduced to nothing more than like couch potato consumers with a monitor this far in front of them, and all they do is make choices about new things to buy. Right? So the stakes are clear for the situation in which we find ourselves. This is the challenge that we face, a new challenge, a heightened challenge in education today. And so we've been decentered, and we have to recenter ourselves, and that's actually the focus of the panel discussion, and I hope the whole day is, okay, well, how, right? Like, how do we begin to recenter ourselves? So that's primarily the focus of the panel, but I do want to just sprinkle one other design challenge on for us as we think about how we recenter ourselves, which is that for as long as any of us can remember, education, wherever you are in the world, has looked and continues to look exactly the same, right? There is one teacher. There are many students. There is one subject at a time. And the job of the teacher is to transmit. I have something, you don't. You have to come here this morning in order to get it. This is very hard to break free of because it's very comforting for all of us. And yet, the challenge is, even today, you walk into a lot of university lecture halls, they're going to look like this. But if you flip the camera around, this is what you see. So what are we doing? Right? Every child literally has a portal on their desk for the totality of human wisdom, and we're still stuck in this same paradigm. So some of you know that I write a column for Substack, but I actually want to give a recommendation for somebody else on that platform. His name is Dan Meyer. He's a math teacher. He writes a column called Math Worlds, Must Read. And he recently made a point in one of his columns where he was saying, look, all of this talk about technology and all of the amazing things that's going to do and chatbots and platforms and blah, 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 the reality is there are two questions that kids come to school to answer every day. Who am I and how do I do this? Right? Who am I? Questions of identity, questions of purpose, questions of values. Who am I in relation to you? Who am I in relation to my community? Who am I in relation to adults? Who am I in relation to systems of power? And how do I do this, right? The ideas and the disciplines of a profession. But the point that Dan Meyer makes, and I think this is a really important thing for all of us to think about as we start this day, is for most kids, most days, those two questions are the same question. They're the same question. They want to understand how do I, through relationships that deepen their capacity to experience who am I. And technology and its frictionless seduction can't do that. That's why the reality is a lot of personalized learning can feel really isolating to kids. Yet learning with their peers in a classroom does not. So let's just be careful that we don't rush too quickly to solve the wrong problem. Okay, 2 other things, and then we're going to bring up our panel. One is, this is a book that my design studio did a few years ago. It's called Seed and Spark. If anybody wants a free digital copy of this book, go to seedandspark.live. You can get one. But the reason I share it here is this was a research project, and we set out to try to understand what are the irreducible conditions of a thriving learning environment. In the same way that we've reduced our genes to A, G, C, and T, whole lot of genes in this room, but they're all variations of A, G, C, and T, right? What is the A, G, C, and T of learning? That was the question we asked. And it seems kind of embarrassing to say now, but we didn't ask that question thinking it would lead us to nature. But of course it led us to nature, right? Mother Nature's been at this a hell of a lot longer than we have. And so in this book, what we're trying to do is unpack the 7 design principles of living systems, right? This is the table of contents. Again, it's a free digital book. Go check it out. But the reason I wanted to show it to you real quickly is the 3 primary design conditions of a living system, right? Whether it's the Amazon rainforest or a bunch of stem cells slowly making their way into demarcated roles and responsibilities in the human body, the 3 primary design principles might as well be words that are taken straight from our playbook. Identity, information, and relationships. Who am I? How do I do this? So I just want to give you 3 quick examples about how this is already alive in the world, and then I'm going to invite our panel up and we're going to talk a little bit more. Okay? I could give so many examples, as could you, but I just want to give you 3. How many people know Anji Play in China? Anybody? Okay, this is a very cool new program. It's now extended across every early childhood program in the entire district of Anji, China. It's dealing with 14,000 kids. And the fundamental design principles of Anji Play: love, risk, joy, engagement, and reflection. And again, this is in China, where we think we've got hang-ups about tests. China takes it to a whole different level. And now that culture, where kids have been stressed out in this entire region of the country, are coming every day in very specifically designed conditions to understand who they are and how they do different things. Anji Play says, what we're doing is preparing today's children for life in tomorrow's society. That's one. 42, anybody know 42 in France? So billionaire coder was like, nobody's learning how to code in the right way. So he created this school where it's free. A lot of the kids that go there don't have any previous experience in coding. The day that I visited them, I was interviewing this one student who actually had been a computer science major, and she was like, yeah, the first 4 days were kind of everything that I had learned, and then everything else was new. She had a 4-year degree in computer science. Everything was new. But what they say their source code is, no courses. All project-based, peer-to-peer learning. Entirely dependent on the people that you're in the boat with to steer the ship. Pretty cool. But lest we think that the only things that we can focus on are like the shiny new objects, I would suggest this is the most underappreciated person of the 20th century, right? 1907, she sees this tenement house in Rome, and the parents are all working, the kids are just going bananas during the day, and she's like, I think I can do something about this. And her whole idea is, if we intentionally set the conditions for these children to properly explore their surroundings and figure out the things that are interesting to them, it can work, right? And now there's not only I don't know how many thousands of Montessori schools around the world, but 25,000 public Montessori schools. And the last thing I wanted to show you is just a short clip from a film I made about one of them. So this is Libertas Montessori. It's a public Montessori school in Memphis. The film you're about to see, the total film is about 12 minutes long. I just want to show you, it's a 2-minute clip that I think captures not only what makes Montessori so timeless, but also what gets at the heart of what Dan Meyer was saying about those 2 questions. So can we roll that?
It's hard to get out or to break a cycle of poverty, like the mental cycle of poverty. But if the child sees that they can do more and they have tangible examples, and then they know what to say, they know what to do, they know how to express themselves, I feel like that'll unlock so many doors for them. And I see so much potential in several of my kids, and they have such hard lives. And I'm hoping that I can pour into them and they keep it.
The real mission of the school, right? The aspects of wonder, work, and love that we can impart, and they could really impart on us. The children and their families are a gift to us because, they're the reason why we're here.
There's a process to everything in Montessori. We explicitly teach, like, how to roll a rug. And a rug is so important because it has my work on it. And I make a big deal about everything. Like, this is my work. And it took me a long time to do it. And it would really hurt my feelings if somebody stepped on my work. So we always walk around people's work. So that teaches them not to step on the rugs. That's teaching them respect again. Making a big deal about the work. It's my work. It's important to me. Then it's instilling an importance in their work to the children.
The model itself lends itself to students taking accountability at a very early age for their own behavior.
It calls to the children, the work, they can't resist it. You'll see little kids rub their hands up against the wall. It's called a sensitive period. Like you're in a dark room and there's a flashlight on this one thing and you see everything else, but you're just so drawn to that one thing. These kids, if they're interested in something, they delve really deep. These young kids, if they're interested, I had one child who was like, when I jump up, I'm pulled back to the ground. Why am I pulled back to the ground? That's gravity, kid. Let's go in there. So then we just get really deep with it.
I was skeptical at first because I didn't see the seats arranged in a certain way, a structure and order that the traditional school setting has. Since that's what was normal to me, I assumed that was the only way to teach.
Our main focus is on making sure that they not only become good students, but good people.
My husband is the one that told me about Libertas. I think he was in kindergarten when he brought this word fortitude home. He used it in a sentence and he used it properly. And I said, well, what does fortitude mean? He said, well, Mom, that means even though there's things around you that seem hard to be able to handle, you still push forward and do what you need to do. My husband passed away when he was in 1st grade.
There was another line in a Dan Meyer column where he's like, our task is to take the totality of human wisdom and impart it to children in 12 years. While they're experiencing acne and falling in love, while our social investments are increasing the number of children that are living in poverty, while all of us walk around with the scars of the epigenetic traumas that all of us have inherited, and you're telling me that you want to offer them a chatbot? No, right? The opportunity of the moment, whether the singularity has or has not arrived, is to prioritize and double down on the human advantage, our humanness. Who am I? How do I? Longing, belonging, identity, information, relationships, wonder, work, love. How we do that is the focus of today and the focus of this panel. And in a minute, I'm going to bring them up. But first, thank you. So I guess we'll do this one at a time, right? So actually, sorry, let's start with Julia. Julia Freeland Fisher is the Director of Education Research at the Clayton Christensen Institute. She is the mother of 2 adorable little girls, and her team is all about figuring out how do we transform away from this like monolithic factory-driven model to student-centered designs. So she brings a real keen research eye to the work. Julia, welcome. Joel Vargas is the Vice President of the Education Practice at Jobs for the Future. If you haven't read their recent report called The Big Blur, please also add that to your list and download it. Joel's been with the Jobs for the Future since 2002. He's done a lot of work around state policy agendas, model legislation. He's written and researched white papers that relate to these larger 30,000-foot challenges as we think about the systems that hold us prisoner. Joel, welcome. Yusuf Ahmad is a lifelong kindergartner, self-described, who works for the Reinvention Lab at Teach for America. He is responsible for building the infrastructure for a creative society. He's built creative tools for kids at MIT Media Lab. He was also part of the founding network of a Pan-African university. He's most importantly the father of a newborn, Yusuf. Rachel McBride is a senior youth staff member of the Partnership for Southern Equity's Yes for Equity portfolio. She's also a student at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and her work is all focused around achieving racial equity from a youth power-based lens. Rachel, welcome. And last but not least is Dr. D, Danique Dolly, who leads Big Picture Learning's BP Living initiative. He's been at the Met and Big Picture since its founding, was also a part of the founding of one of my favorite schools, the City Neighbors School in Baltimore. And he was the principal there for 6 years. Dr. D. And I'm going to come join you all in a minute, and then but first I just want to give you all the context of what we're doing. So here's the challenge with panels, right? We've got like 45 minutes, and the way most panels go is it's a bunch of individual comments that are in no way connected to one another or anything lasting, and you walk out and you get coffee and you're like, I don't know what just happened, right? We're going to try to avoid that. And the way we're going to try to avoid that is by thinking together in real time. I told them we're going to kind of do this, but I said don't come with advanced prep. In my mind, the main thing that would be helpful for us to co-create with you is what are the, do we have a slide for this? No. What are the 6, the 8, the 10 commandments for ed funders as they relate to these particular issues today, the intersection of technology, of learning, and of work? If we were just going to boil it down so that when you left, you didn't have to heed it, but you at least knew that these folks who have a real wealth of experience and a lot of issues would be saying, these are the commandments that when you go away and you start making funding decisions, you should pay attention to. So we're going to do it that way. So I've asked them, if somebody has a comment, I want it to be, I have a commandment. Tell us what the commandment is, and then help us understand why you think that one's important. And we'll just kind of see how well we can co-construct it as we go through. Does that sound good? All right. Does anybody want to start? Does anybody immediately want to jump in with a commandment? or an observation?
This is so not like me. I'm a policy wonk, and I like to be very prepared, Sam. So, I think the thing that comes to mind is, and I don't know how you do this, so I know we're going to shape this as we go, but support stretch experiences. Because when I looked at the two, what were the who am I and how do I do this? I think about what's been most important in my learning. It all boils down to anecdote, right? But there's evidence to support this as well. It is this idea of you get at those things through supportive stretch. I've had mentors in my life at certain moments in my life who said, you could do this next thing. And I said, I don't think I could do that. And I said, well, do you want to try it? And I might be interested enough to try it, and it's a hell of a stretch. And I got some support. But when I learned it, I had this incredible sense of self-efficacy, and then all of a sudden it just became blended into my identity. And how do you support policies? We have systems that really don't do that. And I have to say, where I learned that best was outside of the traditional systems. And so how do you build an ecosystem that supports that?
So I hear two potential ones, and I want to repeat them and then see if anybody else wants to elaborate on them. So one, this idea that a commandment could be to support stretch experiences. And I know we're in a room of people that care about education, so we could just geek out, right? That is totally backed up by the research about zones of proximal development, right? And even Anji Play, one of their design principles is risk. None of us learn best when we're comfortable. None of us learn best when we feel that we're in danger. We learn best when we feel supported and able to take risks. And then the second one that you just hinted at, and so maybe somebody will pick up the ball and run with it, is the idea of tinkering outside the main system. And I wonder if anybody else wants to just put a little bit more meat on those bones, because I think there's a lot that can be said to a room of ed funders about the value of finding experiments that exist outside the traditional system. Anybody want to take that bait? Rachel.
Rachel wants to take that bait.
All right.
Okay, so I think the whole world works in systems. We live in a very systematic universe where we have to put things into boxes and we have to be able to compartmentalize things to understand them. And so with young people, if you don't create productive systems for them to exist in, they're going to exist in unproductive systems. And so for me personally, I'll get anecdotal as well. I saw that the United Way of Greater Atlanta was one of the sponsors for this convention, and I actually started my nonprofit journey with them in the 8th grade, believe it or not. One of their representatives came to my school, ended up speaking to my class, and for some reason he latched on to me, and he passed me on to Kim Addy, who worked at the United Way for a very long time. She's no longer there. But Kim developed me. I don't know what she saw in me that made her want me to do things for her and for the United Way. But I got my skills in the nonprofit space developed. I was able to co-chair a youth council that was based in my home city of College Park. And from there, I guess whenever my opportunities at the United Way kind of ran dry, she passed me on to another organization. And that was the Partnership for Southern Equity. And I'm still employed there. I've been employed there since my 10th grade year of high school. I'm now a sophomore in college. And that's like, whenever I tell people that I have a job, and it's like an actual job at a nonprofit, it's a surprising thing because that's a rare thing, especially for young people. And I was funneled through one of those unconventional systems where there was a structure put in place for me, there were eyes on me. My movement was tracked a lot as well. And I feel like if that was scaled to a larger level, and through many organizations, and many organizations made intentional space for young people, there's a lot of opportunity for investment there. And I know people say, Gen Zers are quick to quit jobs, but you know, I'm going on 20 and I've been employed for almost 4 years now, and I don't think about quitting, so.
I'm glad you spoke next, Rachel, too, because I was thinking, knowing a little bit about your story, that your story is an example of what Joel was saying about supporting stretch experiences. You wanted to hop in?
Yeah, I just want to add on, that's authentic. That's a relationship. I think having structures, or if we're thinking about a commandment, who's building relationships? Who are you getting to know? Who do you develop over time a relationship? So when a new fad or the new thing, you know, went from equity to anti-racist to this to that, whatever the thing is, yeah, you're developing a relationship over time. I mean, you're getting to know people, including what you're looking at. I think also, this was real. It's real, it's authentic. We're in a world where everything is artificial, even the intelligence. Even the food we eat, actually, GMOs and everything else. That's why we work with health at Big Picture. And allowing people to really think, all right, how do you connect with somebody in the real world if you have an interest? You know, how do you really, if you're in school, you're in school waiting for real life. Like, how can you engage with real life right now? Kids don't need to wait. So why are we allowing them to wait and graduate? They're not ready. At Big Picture schools, from the beginning, you do your Who Am I project. And who are you? And how are you going to connect to the world? Second question after Who Am I? And that is a project. Second question is like, who are we as a community? And then after that, how do we get the world to love us? Because somebody always thinks differently about kids. So first, relationships. And then making things authentic in an artificial world.
I want to repeat that back, and then I want to come to you, Julia, if I can. So I love the idea that as a commandment, and this may seem obvious, but I don't think it is. The commandment that I heard you say is authentic is greater than artificial. As a commandment, are you investing in authentic people? Carbon is greater than silicon. Are you investing in people, or are you investing in technology? Yes, we need some technology, but what's actually most important in order for the kinds of experiences that Rachel had and the kinds of work that the Met has been doing for decades is that kind of a priority. And Julia, you had said once the idea, which sounded like a commandment to me, what if relationships were the outcome? I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, when Sam said we were doing commandments, I felt a little bit like floppy and intimidated, and now I'm like fired. I mean, I never command anything of funders except give me money. But I think there is a very clear through line here, which is that we have to fund relationships as outcomes, not inputs in their own right. And we have to think about what does it look like to design interventions where relationships outlast the intervention, where they can keep giving long after your money has dried up. And what I worry about is that there's a lot of rhetoric starting to swirl around how do we combat loneliness, how do we ensure that in the age of AI, our young people still have caring relationships. Nothing about our schools is designed to optimize for connection. Teachers care about relationships, staff care about relationships, but if you look at the priorities that policy and I'd argue philanthropy have put in place, we are constantly looking for efficiencies that shortcut relationship rather than double down on it. So there's a lot of ways you can, as funders, actually give your grantees permission to treat relationships as outcomes. I'll just give two quick examples. One is in the social emotional learning space. I was on a panel a few years ago with folks from the Aspen Seed Commission and was also feeling a little feisty that day, I guess. But I looked at the report and I do this with every report that comes out. Control F, relationships, Control F, skills. Skills appeared over 140 times in that report, relationships just over 20. So we use this rhetoric, social emotional learning, we talk about relationships mattering, but the center of gravity is around skills, I'd argue because it's employer-centric, not student-centric. So how do we balance that in social emotional learning? Another example in career-connected learning, getting a ton of attention now, I'd argue the last standing bipartisan issue in education in America. We're tracking engagement and experiences. We're not tracking whether students have mentors and brokers who are going to keep introducing them to their next opportunity. We're not thinking of that as success, and as a result, I think we're pouring a lot of money into the wrong outcomes or into really short-sighted outcomes that aren't going to buffer the risks that young people today are facing. So there's my commandment. Treat relationships as outcomes in their own right.
So thou shalt support stretch experiences, prioritize relationships as the outcome, not the input. Prioritize the authentic over the artificial, and design interventions where the relationships can outlast the intervention. Now, if we're not careful, we're going to start to seem like anti-technologists in here, and it's not one or the other, right? The reality is, as I said, the genie has left the bottle, and we're not even a year in. Think about that. The Washington Post did this article, you can find it, where the headline was like, see how much your job is at risk for AI. And like you plug in your profession and they tell you, spoiler alert, unless you're a dancer, everyone's fucked, okay? Like, so let's just move past it. But that means we still have to do something with this, like the idea that AI is not going to take your job, but a person using AI is. So Yusuf, I feel like you're a person that can help the rest of us keep the right balance when it comes to, yes, relationships is an outcome, yes, authentic more than artificial, but also what do we do with these cool, shiny things that are so seductive?
I mean, good question. Who in the room has a phone, a smartphone? I mean, to Sam's point, like technology is in the world around us. It's in everything. I mean, the blackboard that you saw in your presentation, that's technology, right? It's not a question of either or, humans or technology. We use technology every day. It's not just AI. And I think the question that you raised in your talk is what matters? Like what actually like really matters? And that's actually a question I'd have for like Rachel and Dr. D. And part of it's because like, you know, Carlos, big picture, y'all have been doing the work for decades, right? Talking about relationships, centering relationships, and taking L's in other areas to prioritize what really matters. And so my question too, if you're gonna like double click on what Julia's talking about, what do you think funders, others don't get when it comes to actually prioritizing relationships with respect to other things? And the reason I bring you into this is, you know, we talk a lot about like student-adult co-creation and like bringing student voices into this work. You're studying for a midterm. Like folks don't know this, like Rachel is like double majoring, one of her majors is computer science. As someone who's like deep in tech, that's not light. And so like she's studying for midterm, jumped on stage. What are the kind of enabling structures that would help you do this work do you feel like folks don't get?
I feel like, at least with my lived experience, I don't know what my life would look like had it not been for my introduction into the nonprofit space. I don't know what school I would have ended up at. And so I feel like with this whole conversation about technology and whether or not it's breaking down our ability to communicate or relate or et cetera, it comes from a specific place. And from my place, I feel like technology kind of allowed me to exist in the social sphere. I feel like there are two, while we all have, like at this point, most of us have access to things like smartphones and, you know, the base level technology that all of us see as standard now. Just access to things like Zoom or access to things like, in that technological sphere, they allowed me to be able to work. And this is especially true for people who come from lower income places, who have kind of more things to juggle. Like Yusuf said, before I got on stage, I was studying for a midterm. And so I feel like my lived experience kind of speaks to that whole technology. It's integral to us being able to have human experience because there's a lot of exposure that I wouldn't have had it not been for the advancements of my age when I was coming up, and I know that with AI, it's like a really scary thing, but on the note of, you know, AI is not gonna replace jobs, people who learn AI are gonna replace people who don't know how to use AI, that kind of thing. I feel like the most important thing for people, and especially people who are giving money, to know is that that technology has to be put in the hands of people who are disinvested, in the hands of young people who are disinvested, because that creates like a whole new world for us. It created a whole new world for me. So while like new things can be daunting, I think they're really, really necessary to include new voices at the table. Because of course with technology becomes like a lot of challenges, but it also creates access and widens the scope and evens the playing field for people, because there are a lot of people I know who learn coding at home or at school on their school internet. And because I have the opportunity to work in a hybridized space, because you know my work at PSE is hybridized, we do in-person stuff because I'm based in Atlanta, we're based in Atlanta, but it's also mainly virtual. With me being able to do that, work from home, work from school, work from wherever, I've been able to have longevity in the job, and on top of that, that income allowed me to have more choices when it came to my mobility, where I go to school, what I study. I was able to not worry so much about going wherever gave me the most money because I had supplemental income to kind of fill in those gaps. So yeah, I think the baseline commandment I would give for that is to understand that technology can be an asset only if you choose to consciously make it an asset and choose to prioritize people who are farthest from positive outcomes when it comes to technology.
If I may add, get the power to the people. You gotta get the power. Like I heard Misha mention that yesterday. Like, we can't make decisions for students and youth. Are you living through? You're living through this as an adult. I know nobody here. 10 years ago, we had this conversation. 10 years ago, talking about, oh, what do you think the future will be like? You would not predict what is happening today. You would not predict this. If you are, you're a genius. You need to predict the next 10 years, but you're not going to do it. So what I'm saying is, throw the students, throw the families as a part of this. If you're looking at a program, do they include student voice deeply and not just, you know, they got to be at the table. They're not just, if they're not at the table, they might be part of the menu, as they say. Like, you got to bring them to the table. They become empowered when you include them and their voice matters. This is not a technical fix, although this is a technology problem. It's adaptive. So you have to bring in different people. You have to bring in the parents and the students. And what we've had, we've always had the structure. Carlos, we got something right 30 years ago. So what we're saying is, we have the structure of getting the kids out there, connecting them with their interests, but also coming back to their second home known as an advisory. It was the funniest thing is during the pandemic, and if we're not doing, and then all the programs not doing something different post-pandemic, you might want to ask why. You might want to say, what are you doing? Because we have new forms and new measures now. We realize, well, we got to change some things. We got to look at health. 1 out of every 3 people will be diabetic in the next 30 years, according to the CDC. All right? So what are we doing about health? Mental health we talk about, but it's also wellness and personal body, how you live. You know, like I said, the food and so on. But I'm moving beyond that, and what you're looking at is what connections do you make for the relationships? What connections do you have to get them outside and work with them when it comes to technology? If I had any of this stuff, I would say, yeah, all right, let's go. Let's dive into ChatGPT. Tell me what y'all learned. Come back and let's tomorrow or take an hour and play with it. If you don't play with it, how you gonna learn? Because kids they're gonna do it anyway, and they're gonna do it better than me. That's how it is.
Yeah. So it's like just like one, I guess one, actually real quick, who here has visited a big picture school?
Did you hear that question?
Who here has visited a big picture school?
All right, we need to organize a road trip.
And I promise Carlos and Dr. D are not paying me.
Or me.
But so the reason I'm asking that is I think a couple kind of principles. One is get out there, right? Get hands-on, experiment, right? Whether it's with technology, right? Playing with ChatGPT, playing with other AI tools, reflecting on how technology is showing up in your work and the work of your grantees and the work of the communities that you're serving, because it's already out there. Which brings me to the second point, which Rachel brought up, right? Folks are using these tools. Learn from them, learn with them, ask them the tough questions. What work is this doing for you? What work is it doing against you, right? And the third piece I'll just bring in, what's at stake in this moment? If you go back to your slides, I heard kind of you using language around, we as a society have had this vision of AI. Let's reconsider that we, right? Hollywood at that time, right, mainly white, representing very particular voices, and those particular voices project out an image of AI, of technology. And I think the moment that we're in, what's at stake is that who's developing the underlying AI infrastructure, right? Microsoft has $10 billion invested in OpenAI. Amazon just invested $4 billion in Anthropic, OpenAI's main competitor. As foundations, I think there's an opportunity to step up and start thinking about what does open source infrastructure look like? What does public infrastructure underneath these tools look like? Because what's at stake, as Dr. Ruha Benjamin, who leads the IW Wells Just Data Lab at Princeton, reminds us, is we're at risk of a new Jim code, right? A lot of these systems have algorithmic bias baked in, and if the market is the only incentive at stake, as a technologist, I don't have a lot of hope for the market just solving that problem. Right, that's the world we're in. And so diversifying who's creating and making with these technologies is, yes, it solves immediate problems with your communities. You're learning from expertise, but you're also shaping how these things are being addressed. And this isn't theoretical. I'm just gonna give a shout out real quick to Mike Yates. Mike, if you're in the audience, could you raise your hand? Or stand up, actually, because it's a big room. And so if he's not standing up, that means he's across the way over at the collaboratory.
I think Mike's sleeping in.
If you haven't been to the collaboratory, I'm gonna give you a shout out real quick. So it's across the way. It's a space where you can actually start playing with these tools and technologies today. Right, so Michael Yates is an educator, he's a storyteller, he's a father of four, a school designer. He's not a technologist, but he's been building tools, right, with young people, with kids across the US, tools that support coaching, tools that are embedded in real contexts of use. And so go play with him and see how real people are using these tools and start to, again, get out of your head and get into action, right? So I think that's those, I'm talking a lot, but those are, I think, the three main invitations that I give to y'all.
Sam, can I make an observation? Yeah. I'm not sure it's gonna end in a clear commandment, but I'm just hearkening back, Julius builds off your comment about relationships as an outcome, right, which I agree with. And I think a big picture in the work fantastic work you've been doing for so long. And I just think of how different, maybe we're more enlightened now, I guess, right? But this is coming with a cautionary tale as well. From 20 years ago, when I started this work, it was about standards-based reform as a civil rights issue, okay? It kind of reduced, I don't know if people remember this, right? And I was a big believer in that. The conversation has changed so much. I think it got so reduced down to a skills and attainment agenda. I'm still there in many ways, because you need a job. We're a capitalist society, right? So people need a means to support themselves. So I think we still have schools that produce unequal outcomes on those measures, which I would argue maybe they're not the right measures, right? And we had the small schools movement, which was all about relationships, and then someone came along and said, well, it's great to have all those hugs, but what are the test scores showing us, okay? So these are things that start to swing the pendulum in unproductive, extreme ways. So if there's some commandment that comes out of this, we have to wed this rhetoric and what we know is important now with what employers care about. We have to be able to kind of co-construct a language and an understanding of how these things are related. Otherwise, we're gonna continue to just push the pendulum in unproductive ways.
Can I just riff on that? We've always talked about this in terms of opportunity sits at the cross-section of what you know and who you know. Half of jobs and internships come through personal connections. So the who you know, the relationship side, I think, is part of an equity issue. And we absolutely need to attend to the what you know side. What I worry about is employers don't care whether students have networks. Employers don't care whether students are self-actualized, right? And so it's balancing what I see as maybe the pendulum being quite employer-centric, because education is always hesitant of how much can we ask of our employers, with student-centric, with listening to young people themselves. And so I think it is, to your point, not swinging the pendulum so far away from rigor, skills, employability, durable skills, but accounting for the fact that opportunity gaps are different from skills gaps. And I think we sometimes use those as synonyms in the space.
And I would add, be careful of, what you think students need. It's always, well, let's make sure we give the students what they need. For what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, and don't end that sentence with the period. I think one thing I'm not hearing that I want to add or consider, it seems like a lot of the strategies and things are often like education, only education. Like, don't let health in, don't let mental, like, or don't, it's not intersectional. It's not like, all right, technology and education, or media and education, or health and education. Like, how do we do, I think if you can, that's the world we live in. We're talking about connection, so how are we modeling that in the strategies?
I think there needs to be a greater scale investment in the youth apprenticeship model. For those who are unfamiliar, youth apprenticeship is like an evolution of the internship model. Y'all know for a while, unpaid internships were a big thing, and that never made sense to me. Because imagine being able to afford spending 40 hours of your week at a place for free. And then there are paid internships, which are considered to be like the best work experience to receive if you're trying to get into a field long term. And more recently, the model it's called youth apprenticeships. It has a work component and it has an educational component. And I mentioned United Way earlier. I'm collaborating with them on a project called Career Ready ATL, which is a youth apprenticeship program that aims to serve the most impacted areas of Metro Atlanta. And if y'all are familiar with United Way's Child Wellbeing Index, there are some most affected counties. I am from one of those most affected counties. And so I think the value in that is that young people are receiving both soft and hard skills. They're learning, they're able to receive things like school credit, and then on top of that, they're getting paid. So there's an incentive to continue on that path to gain more skills from an independent standpoint. Because I feel like once you give people a good solid foundation to work on, they'll go find opportunity for themselves because they'll have the literacy, the skills, and the agency to do so. So I feel like that model needs to be, like, if we're talking money again, money needs to be put into that model, because if we're talking about cultivating young people for the workforce, if we're talking about doing things employers want or will respond to, and that young people also will respond to, I feel like that model is a great place to start. So I feel like that could be a commandment.
And the place I jump in on that is there's a movement right now. I think Joel is playing a really important role in this, as is Julia. And I think the question I'd throw to you all in the room is, how might technology then fit within that, right? That's a powerful outcome, that's a powerful story. There are a lot of points where young people get stuck, right? How do I think beyond what I know? How do I connect with folks who I don't know? When I get stuck with trying to scope down an ambitious project into something specific, how might I do that? And they're real tools, right? You can play with some of the career coaching tools we have in the collaboratory back there that help young people get unstuck, right? And so I think that's a question I'd ask. The second piece as funders is, as you think about making investments like that, right, how might you collaborate? Because there are a million different career programs across the country. A lot of them are building their own, not just curriculum and programs, but their own technology now. How might you invest in ways that encourage them to collaborate, open source their stuff, right, build on shared infrastructure? But that's a second lens that I share in this moment. But I'm kind of curious, because y'all are at the thick of this.
Oh, I totally agree. It's, there are lots of potential virtues in technology we're talking about. One of them is to help make sense of this diverse, growing field, right? And it's kind of wild, wild west out there, so we need some way to understand it and what really matters, and open portals that lead to good places for young people. So that's why I'm excited about the work that we're doing at JFF Ventures and investing in different kind of technical platforms. But also, just to build on a point that Rachel made around youth apprenticeship, and I think the potential for AI to facilitate more kind of guided stretch experiences for young people. Based on I'm on the ledge of my understanding here, but AI has a lot of potential to understand, like, your mental model. Like, how's this person thinking? Like, let's try to unstick them, if you will, even in terms of how they're modeling their understanding of a problem, and trying to unstick that probably faster than would say a lot of humans can. So, but with the right kind of human touch and interaction and those guided experiences, I think we can accelerate the way that people stretch themselves and learn new things and build a sense of self-efficacy.
I think it's interesting that what you were talking about earlier, it's not just, first of all, Neil deGrasse Tyson's, this isn't just AI, it's machine learning. The stuff has been around forever since Watson, beat the best chess player and all that. I think it's understanding that after an industrial revolution, it's an industrial revolution. That means things are changing at a rapid pace. So think about it. When electricity came about, things drastically changed, or you were a Luddite. So it's like, hey, what is changing right now that we have to totally adjust our mind state and move forward and allow them to be a part, the students to be a part of that? Because it's not going anywhere. The vacuum cleaner in that Roomba thing that cleans your place also takes the dimensions of your house, like where you live. This is beyond us. So it's like, hey, how much can we learn, and how much can we allow the students to just really figure it out and dive in, so they're not disconnected. Because who gets disconnected with the latest technology? Somebody who looks like me, just 40 years younger, or that was a joke, or any kids, any black or brown or poor kids, when the latest technology comes out, who's not getting that Wi-Fi or whatever is coming out? They just don't have the capacity, so who gets disconnected? And that's where the connection comes in, the relationships come in, and all of that.
So I got 3 minutes. I'm gonna try to repeat this back and see if this is something that might stick and be helpful. The 11 commandments for ed funders. Support stretch experiences. And Rachel gave you a great example of youth apprenticeship models in Career Ready ATL as a very specific example of those types of things. Define relationships as the outcomes, not the inputs. Design interventions where relationships outlast the intervention. View technology as an asset, not an all-encompassing. Give the power to the people. Get out there and play. And here's where I want to say too, Yusuf was pointing you to go and play. I'm curious, by a show of hands, how many people have already played with ChatGPT, Perplexity, Midjourney, Dolly? Okay, it should be everybody. So even those of you that have already play more. Those of you that haven't, get over yourselves, get out there and see what's possible, okay? Expand the we. Recognize that all of these past efforts have been with a pretty myopic definition of the we. A key part of the work going forward is expanding it. Keep your aperture open. And there were a number of ways that this was talked about. Joel was talking about standards-based reform. It seemed really good, but in retrospect, it really reduced the aperture through which we saw the work. That is always a danger. But then Dr. D was talking about the aperture needs to be beyond just education, right? I mean, we need to be back to Seed and Spark, right? Our challenge, our responsibility is to think systemically, to think ecologically, to view integration as the ultimate measure of health. And then two that were talked about a little bit, Rachel was talking about literacy. I would say, and this is maybe going to seem radical, but it's really not, literacy is greater than fluency. The future for today's children is omnidisciplinary literacy, not fluency in a single profession in the way that it used to be. So we seek literacy more than fluency. And then finally, because we are thinking about all of these cool applications of the tool, a key thing to remember, right? ChatGPT. It is a tool that is designed to look backwards. You got a bunch of stuff in your fridge, you want to come up with a recipe tonight, give it the stuff in your fridge, and it will give you a recipe, because it's just aggregating the internet. You want relationship advice? It will give you relationship advice based on just aggregating what exists in the internet. This is why the initial chatbots quickly became racist and anti-Semitic, because all it's doing is reflecting back at us who we have been up to this point. So let's remember to use technology to look backwards and to use other people to look forwards. And that puts us out of time. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panel.
One more round of applause for this amazing panel. What a great conversation. I am Cori Cain, the Associate Vice President for Education at United Way. And Rachel, I'll be remiss if I didn't take a minute to let you know that we all text Kim to let her know. Give her the flowers that you gave her today. And what I will say back is that she said you make her so proud to have been in your presence and with you. One thing that I would, as I stand here today as a representative of United Way and the work of this region, this conversation really sits heavy on me as we are, with those child wellbeing index insights, still trying to figure out how we get kids in this region broadband internet to be able to see technology as an asset. So as you guys think about funding, that is ground zero, so that technology can be an asset for all. So my colleague Kenita mentioned today the amazing work and intentionality behind planning this conference, and we hope that you have felt it. One more kudos to the staff of Ed Funders because of the work that they've done bringing these type of riveting conversations to us. I have a few reminders for you all. One, lunch today is bento box style. There will be a fish and vegetarian option that you all can pick up and enjoy the conference activities. You all can go to sessions, take time to meet with a colleague during that time, but we will have lunch out in the foyer, bento box style. So some reminders, and I think there's some slides. One thing we want to remind you of are the funder receptions that will happen today, starting at 5:45. There's lots of great conversations planned, so we hope that you would attend those sessions. Another thing is tomorrow, instead of a morning plenary, you have an opportunity to meet with Nicole. She will be here in the ballroom from 7:45 to 8:45. So we encourage you guys to come by, say hello, introduce yourself. Another encouragement are the funder labs. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go to this, tomorrow's plenary. Is it up there already? Okay. Tomorrow's plenary is going to be at 11 o'clock, and it is, the topic of the plenary is education systems change as a path towards racial justice. You are in for a treat. So we have one of the freedom writers that will be here in addition to LaShawn, curating that conversation. I think the last thing that we want to make sure that you do is attend tomorrow's plenary and enjoy meeting and connecting with your colleagues. So again, thank you for your time and attention today. It is very exciting to have you guys in this room and in this space, and we look forward to this journey. We have a little more over a day and a half of great activities planned. So we'll see you around, and thanks again for coming.